I'm Brian Kingsley, the Chief Academic Officer in CMS, and I want to welcome you to your January teacher learning opportunity. I hope that all of you had an opportunity over the holiday break to recharge, to recalibrate, and to refresh. It has been one heck of a school year for all of us, but especially for you. In the trenches, each and every day, you have committed yourself to be a continuous learner, as well as a leader across our entire community to ensure that our services and our opportunity for children to learn never ceased, regardless of whether they're learning from home, in the comforts of their family, or in our classrooms. You've had a lot to say about your learning, things that could have gone better, things that have gone well, things that you have asked and charged us to be considerate of as a district moving forward. And I want to just recognize and start off this new year by saying that we see you. We see the work that you're doing each and every day, the sacrifices that you're making with yourselves, your family, in order to serve others. We also hear you, the feedback that you have provided around the types of things that we should be offering and providing you as a learner and as a leader to support remote learning as well as in-person learning and support all students has been nothing short of phenomenal. So I want to say thank you to that. And I want to end this short opening by just saying we value you. This work is only going to continue to get better if we do it in partnership with you. Today's learning experience focuses on a very important topic, the role that race, power, bias, and equity have in our schools, in our classrooms, in our planning, in all of the various discretionary spaces that we take on as professionals. As we think about this new year, a charge for us to consider is committing to reimagining a new normal for our schools and for our classrooms and for our community, to ensure that we can continue to acknowledge that our last normal did not serve all people well. This is an incredible opportunity under the leadership of our superintendent, Ernest Winston, to begin thinking about these topics and the role that they have in our classrooms. I'd like to introduce Mr. Winston, our proud superintendent, as he has an opportunity to reorient us in our why for this work, the implications that it has on all of us as members of CMS, and the opportunity and the excitement and the hope that we should all hold true in our hearts and in our minds as being a part of this system who is trying to take a gigantic step forward in service of serving all people well. So again, welcome back to finishing the 2020-2021 school year. We hope that you enjoy your learning, and we look forward to continuing to support you on this journey. We're in this together.
So, as we go forward, I'd like to refocus us on our why. And everyone came into education differently, but we all have one thing in common. And that is that our work is about changing lives and making things better for generations to come through public education. We know the world is changing around us, and I don't have to tell you that we're doing what none of us ever imagined we would be doing in public education. And so I want to be very clear. We've got multiple priorities. A safe reentry to school for staff and students and teaching at high levels so that our students, our kids are prepared to be able to thrive after high school, no matter what path they choose. And so right now, when I look at our country, when I look at these United States and the issues that we're grappling with, issues around race and the role that it plays in our American experience, if we think about the national context and the narrative around race inequity, and we consider the forced opportunity that we've been given to redesign the way we deliver education, we must take that time now to examine, to disrupt, and remove those policies and practices that have not served children well. Not doing that would be a disservice to students and staff. And so what makes this hard work is that we've got to tackle huge issues simultaneously. I know it's not easy, it's not convenient, but it's absolutely necessary that we tackle these huge issues simultaneously. So, when I look at our diversity journey, our journey to create a more equitable public education system, the experience that we're providing for all students, that has taken many different forms. And I can remember when I first joined the district, there was a show. It was hosted by Rahman Khan, and many of you all may recall the name. Rahman hosted a show called Diversity Matters. And we focused at that time on recognizing our diversity and the value of embracing it. We transitioned from that to diversity and inclusion work because we recognized just to say diverse which is really just to name the obvious, that wasn't enough. But to embrace diversity and intentionality includes different people and their perspectives. And so our most recent approach that we've taken was cultural proficiency, which really focused on the individual mindsets and biases. And many of us, I know we completed our IDIs, our intercultural development inventory, which let us know how we fall on that continuum. And all of these efforts have been focused on people and their individual development. Now, you will see this picture. I'm gonna give you a quick pop quiz. Do you all remember what this is a photo of? Anybody? So for those of you who said this was a photo taken in 1957, shown around the world, of a then 15-year-old named Dorothy Counts. You're right. As she integrated the building that was Harding High School at the time. And the reason I lift up this photo, because if you could see Dorothy walking in to Harding High School, the word racist makes everyone uncomfortable because the term has been used to describe people. And that word evokes feelings and images that are among the cruelest in history. And using that word this way excludes many of us because none of us in this Zoom room, not that I'm aware of, have ever been a part of activities that boldly persecutes groups of people. And so racist people versus racist policies. The anti-racism work does not focus on villainizing people, but rather it examines policies and practices that are racist. All of the work that we've done so far on our cultural awareness journey focuses on people as individuals, where everyone is on their individual journey. And there's nothing wrong with that approach, but we've done that for years and have not seen substantial or even equitable change in outcomes for our students. The anti-racism lens, it allows us to question system design based on the outcomes we're seeing and the experiences our children are having. So today, we're going to hear from some of our students. One of the major reasons for delving deep into the issue of race and equity in CMS is because whether you know it or not, our students are incubating in the conditions we've set up for them. We're literally shaping their views through experiences we are creating every day in our schools. And in order for us to create something different, something better for all students, we need to listen to them and examine our practices. So our first student voice audio segment covers responses that were provided when we asked them the question, what inequities have you seen or experienced at your school? Now, it's important to remember that we didn't use the word race in the question. We only asked it and they provided the responses that you will hear.
I would say that's like me switching from like a majority like school where people had a lot into going to a school where people didn't based on my zip code. So I went to Carmel Middle School, and if you've ever been there, like um that school is a pretty well off school. And then when I went to Harding, it was completely different. So I was like completely surprised about like all the stuff like the stuff they had compared to a middle school and then compared to other high schools as well.
I feel like teachers should be more lenient with internet issues because a lot of people don't have hotspots, do not have Wi Fi. So when we're telling these teachers that we can't get into Zoom calls, they're like, tough luck, and they'll mark you absent. And we only have 10 absences, and it's not fair.
Playing a little bit off of the situation of when it comes to like honors or standard classes within higher level classes, whether it be AP or IB or honors, oftentimes even at a school like North Mech, I mean, I go to the same school as Brianna, there's often tends to be a disproportionate amount of white students compared to the demographics of our school. And one specific thing I've found, and I've seen it happen specifically in a few classes, which is where there is a huge disparity in the way behavior is treated for students of color versus white students. Like I had a specific instance freshman year where I'm a very outgoing person, I talk a lot, and my group of friends and I were talking too much. It's the way it happens, we're teenagers. And there was another group of students, a group of Black females, who talked arguably less than we did. However, they were always the students that she targeted, that she kicked out of the room. We never received the same disciplinary consequences. And I've seen it happen time and time again. So I'm not specifically Brianna, but that's another situation as a whole. But I believe that that's something that really should be addressed with teachers. Is it's not just blatant racism. It's also bias, that it's a lot more underlying that needs to be addressed when it comes to behavioral issues like that.
And I also feel like it comes down to other things like not only in the classroom, but when it comes to dress code and when it comes to just different behavior, things that happen on campus. A lot of times it is people of color who are targeted more, I feel, by administration or other teachers. And it's also kind of awkward for students to point that out to those same teachers, like you're supposed to be able to report these things to, because it almost seems like, how do you tell a teacher that you feel, or how do you tell like their peer, like their work, their
Co-worker.
their coworker, how do you tell them that you feel targeted by the specific teacher? Because there's a situation that happened at my school where there was a bunch of students who were in a classroom and the N-word was like read by the teacher, and the principal handled it, but it was also very awkward for students to be able to report it because it was kind of like it's a person that's not only in higher power, like a higher position than you, but it's like very awkward.
I've seen the same thing happen, like what she said, with administrators automatically going to break up groups of Black students instead of the dozens of other people that are talking and hanging out in the hallways during class changes. And I think that one issue that's really, really big, like somebody said in the chat, are microaggressions and implicit bias, because that's the hardest thing to prove. Because there's a huge narrative that a lot of people have that it's not an issue or you're imagining it, or so I just think that those are some of, from what I see, some of the things that are hardest to tackle, I guess.
Now, I know you heard the names of some of our high schools, some of our schools. That's not as important. What is important is what our students said. And so Kendi, in his book, describes racism as a marriage of racist policies and racist ideas that produces and normalizes racial inequities. And our students pointed out, they pointed to how they interpret the responses of teachers to groups of students. And so our work that lies ahead of us is to examine why that was an acceptable response. And I will tell you that I read chapter 8 twice because it was really intriguing to me the way Kendi unpacked the achievement gap language. It really forced me to think about how we reinforce inequities in our language. He speaks to whether we should be reframing the conversation from standardized tests to standardizing opportunities and expectations. What would be different if we standardize practices for where we allow discretion in what and how we teach core standards? If we begin to examine through an anti-racism lens what we accept from teachers and students in classrooms, what if we examined the narrative we have assigned to certain schools, certain parts of towns, students, and the families in those schools? And so the next audio segment that you'll hear is a perfect example of a behavioral racist practice. And notice I said practice. So what I would ask you to do is you listen to this next audio clip. I want you to hear how this high schooler was able to identify the behavior, and more importantly, how the student was able to question the implications of the adult behavior.
A teacher asked us she said, only for the Black students, raise your hand if you've ever read Harry Potter. And I was like, what? And she asked the Black students to raise your hand if you ever read Harry Potter, like the full thing. And then when Black students, wasn't a lot of us that raised our hands, she said, oh, you see, guys, that's what they do. They don't really read big books like that. And that's not really surprising. And when I asked her, why would you say something like that? She said, oh, I was just doing something in my HODA class. So we're just building off of that. That is not okay. That is not okay in any circumstance. I don't really understand why someone would do something like that. And then that teaches the students, when I was talking to her students, they try to normalize or say that that's okay. She was just trying to tell us in the lesson, or she'll call a Black person a monkey as a joke, and they'll be like, oh, that's okay. She's just saying that as a joke, as some, she just calls people that. That's just her character names. That's not okay, and we shouldn't normalize things like that. So when I'm in my softball group chats, I'm like the only, I play softball. That's a predominantly white sport, and things like that happen. Those are microaggressions that happens to Black students, and we just normalize things like that, and we just think it's okay. Or when we get a lower grade in something, and you ask your white counterparts, oh, what did you get? And you know your quality of work is better than that person. And it's like you constantly have to fight for what you have to do. And that's something that a high school, middle school, elementary school student should not have to incur.
Have lower expectations of people of color, like at a teacher, and like if someone, like for example, me got like a 75, they're like, oh my god, good job, that's amazing. But like a white student who like you have like the same grades, everything, like they get like a 75, and they'd be like crying, like, oh my god, are you okay? What's happening? Like, what's going on? Like, how did you get such a low grade? And I was like, what about the others? Like,
In my personal experience, some subjects that I'm good at or excel at compared to others, it is undermined of me because, like, if I say, "Oh, I know how to do this," like, let's say I'm bilingual, fluent in Spanish, they're like, "Oh, I would have never like thought of that because you're black."
I know I've been called a monkey several times. And sometimes I really do wonder, do people not know that that's not okay? Or when, I don't want to say the word, but when people say the racial slur for Hispanic people, I really do wonder if people are really ignorant, or do they do it on purpose? Maybe it's a little bit of both, but I just want to hear y'all opinion.
And I think this should go unsaid, but it doesn't. And I think that teachers need racial slur training. And that's something I regretfully have to say. But I feel like even the teachers just don't understand this concept. And it's mind boggling.
Like, I know people who literally just don't care that it's offensive. Like, they're aware of it and they don't care. And I had a conversation with somebody that was like, trying to figure out what the word ignorant really means. Does it mean that you don't know and that makes you ignorant, or is it that you do know and you don't care? And I think there are so many aspects to the conversation, and I think a lot of people, especially our age, with what's happening in the world, know that it's not okay and they choose to say it still.
And people around them accept it. Like, they don't choose to speak up about it, or they still, like, I know people at my school who will use racial slurs, and their friends like are very aware that it's wrong and they would never say that, but they choose to do absolutely nothing about it. And I think that's something that needs to be addressed.
I will tell you all that there was so much more in this segment. But what stuck with me is the awareness of these students about microaggressions and how they show up. An anti-racism lens would focus on the structures and the practices, not the people. So perhaps a response using the anti-racist lens would be to think about how our silence about how biases show up in classrooms have played into perpetuating stereotypes. We spent time last fall focused on the decisions that are made in discretionary spaces. And we learned that in those discretionary spaces, we're most vulnerable to biased interpretations and low expectations. Students cannot separate, nor should they be expected to, a teacher's individual bias and personal mindset from the district's goals and strategies. And I'm here to tell you, we have some amazing teachers in this district. But what I heard some of our students describe in the audio clip you just heard, as they said, that is not okay. So from an anti-racism perspective, we would glean from this feedback that perhaps we need to focus on teacher-student exchanges.
9 of the CMS Code of Conduct only like forbids hate speech in the context of bullying, meaning that someone can't say racially derogatory language in the context of like attacking another student, but hate speech explicitly isn't forbidden, which means that if there were like 2 white students who were saying something hateful and derogatory, they couldn't be like, there wouldn't be something in the CMS Code of Conduct which would like explicitly give them a punishment, and it would be up to teacher discretion. So I think there should be an addition to Rule 9 that explicitly explains that hate speech, which is like of any sort, has the same punishment as bullying, if not greater.
So this is an example. Earlier, I talked about valuable feedback. This is another example of valuable feedback. And you all may recognize the voice on the audio clip that you just heard. I'll talk about that just momentarily. The students were able to provide that feedback because they are proximate to the issue. And based on this feedback, we adjusted the student code of conduct to reflect these suggestions around hate speech. And so this is a great example of focusing on the practice and the behavior and looking for ways for how a policy could impact that negative behavior.
Welcome to part 2 of your learning today. We are so glad that you are here to engage with us around teaching and learning in a flexible environment. Some of what you experienced during this session might be brand new learning. Some might be what you're already currently doing in your classroom, or some is a reminder or a refresh. All of the links that are mentioned in this interactive screencast will be listed in the YouTube description below and also listed within the Canvas course. Let's get started.